Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Welcome to the Microsoft Research Visiting Lecture Series. My name is Rich Stokely. It's my pleasure today to introduce Sarah Wilson. Sarah is a blogger, a television host. She's a health coach as well. And she's here today to talk to us about her book, I Quit Sugar. This details her experience weaning herself off sugar. Spoiler alert, she's much happier off the sugar. She's also going to tell us how we can do that in our own lives and what we might expect after we pull the sugar plug. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sarah Wilson.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you very much for having me here, and hello to everybody watching this online from your work cubicles. I'm sorry you can't be in the room with us. I quit sugar in January 2011, and back then I was a journalist. I guess I still am a journalist. I've been a journalist for 21 years. And I had a weekend magazine column that I had to write, and I was short of a topic. I used to write about how to make life better, and I jumped out of an aeroplane with Richard Branson. I've meditated with the Dalai Lama. I've cracked really bad jokes with Edward de Bono and done a bunch of things. And I was short of a topic, and I thought, oh gosh, I should really try quitting sugar. Just to see what happens. I've also got an autoimmune disease, and I don't know how many of you in the room either have an autoimmune disease or know somebody. I'm betting that pretty much everybody here at least knows somebody with an autoimmune disease. I've got one called Hashimoto's, which affects the thyroid. I'd got very, very sick. At the time, or shortly beforehand, I was the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine, and I'd burnt myself out massively. I'd collapsed in a heap. The doctors had said that I was the worst case of Hashimoto's they'd ever seen. They said, it's a miracle you're still alive. People were prodding me. They had interns coming to sort of, look at my blood test results and observe it as a freak of nature. So the endocrinologists, the doctors, nutritionists all said to me, you've got to quit sugar. You've got blood sugar issue problems. You're, heading towards cholesterol issues, pre-diabetes, and so on. So I had two reasons to quit sugar. I also had a very good reason not to quit sugar, and that is because when you've got an autoimmune disease, your hormones are all out and you're particularly addicted to the blood sugar kind of roller coaster. And I was very addicted. For all intents and purposes, I looked like a really healthy eater. I was one of those seductive sugar addicts. I ate dark chocolate, I had honey in my chai tea, I didn't drink soda or pop, as you call it here. I didn't eat any kind of candy, apart from dark chocolate, but again, I'd convinced myself that didn't count. But it added up to about 26 to 30 teaspoons of sugar a day. Now, to just give you some context, you may have read recently that the WHO, or the World Health Organization, has just come out with their draft recommendations to change the daily recommended sugar intake. Now, this is a really big deal. The last time they tried to do it in 2010, basically every arm of the sugar lobby lobbied the Republican senators, and essentially George Bush approached the WHO and said, we're withdrawing, I think it was almost $500 million of funding if you try to instigate these new recommendations. Now, they're being very cautious this time, and they're putting it up for public recommendation. So at the moment, up until the 31st, so today, people can have a say. You can go on there and say, I support these new recommendations. And I highly recommend you do that if you want to get back to your desks and frantically get in your say. But essentially what they've done, the WHO have recommended following sugar intake. For children, it's 3 teaspoons a day. For women, it's 6 teaspoons a day, and for men, it's 9 teaspoons a day. And that's based on, I think, an 1,800 to 2,000 calorie diet. So we're talking very small amounts. The average American, and this is a very conservative estimate, eats about 22 teaspoons of added sugar a day. Now, I should tell you also that those WHO recommendations include fruit juice, they include dried fruit, and they include other kinds of sugar substitutes, as well as honey. Pretty frightening points of comparison. And in a moment, I will actually share with you some indications of how much sugar is in everyday products and everyday healthy products as well. So what exactly, and so I should say, I eventually did quit sugar, and I did it as an experiment for 2 weeks so that I had something to write about. And I don't know if you know too many journalists, but there's nothing like a deadline to make you do something. So that gave me the good kick up the backside to do it. And so I'm actually really grateful for that. I'm also grateful for my disease. It also forced me to quit sugar. I probably wouldn't have done it otherwise, to be absolutely honest with you. So, which doesn't sound very convincing, does it, when I'm here trying to tell you to quit sugar? But I quit. I gave it 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, I was feeling remarkably different. My skin visibly changed. I'd put on quite a bit of weight, about 30 pounds from my autoimmune disease, and that's not that much actually for the kind of disease I had. A lot of people balloon out. I soon lost that weight, and it just dropped off really naturally without having to put too much effort into it. And gradually, obviously it's a number of years later, but I have been able to get my disease or my TSH levels, for those of you who are familiar with this terminology, to a point where it's almost manageable. I'm almost off medication. From having been on the highest dose possible, I'm almost off my medication. I'm very careful about saying that because I don't recommend people come off their medication when they quit sugar. You really have to monitor it yourself. And I've been doing it for a long time now. So why is sugar so bad? We're hearing so much about it in the press. I'm sure you've seen Dr. Robert Lustig's presentation on YouTube. There's countless books coming out. I've arrived in America with my book. A lot of people say, look, it's just another diet. We've had Atkins, no fat. Yes, we eat fat, protein, carbs. What are we meant to eat? The issue with fructose or with sugar is this. Sugar, which let's call it the same thing as high fructose corn syrup, it's the same stuff once it's in your body, okay, give or take a couple of molecules, but essentially it's the same kind of stuff. Both of them are about 50% fructose and 50% glucose. So everyday table sugar, your high fructose corn syrup, is 50% fructose, and it's the fructose that is the problem. It's the only molecule on the planet that we are unable to register in our brains as having eaten. So when you eat glucose or protein or any kind of food molecule, we have a corresponding hormone in our brain that says, I've eaten, I'm now full, and it turns on this sort of appetite satiation mechanism, and it shuts everything down and says, I'm full now, I don't need to eat for a while. So you've probably noticed that you can consume a container this large of either soda or fruit juice or some kind of sweet beverage. We can also eat a whole packet of Oreos in one session. We can also eat a huge amount of calories contained in a candy bar, and we don't get full. You try to eat that much yogurt in one session, or even milk in one session, you will absolutely struggle to do it. And the reason being is that it contains fat, it contains a whole bunch of other things, and it doesn't contain fructose. So our appetite mechanism kicks in, it says, I'm full, I don't want to eat anymore. Bang, done, move on to the rest of your day. Sugar does not possess that mechanism. At the same time, it's been proven, albeit in studies with rats, but this is not the kind of study that you can do on small children, lock them in a room and give them a whole heap of candy and see what happens. It's seen as addictive as cocaine and heroin. Now, there's a number of studies that have shown that rats actually preferring sugar over cocaine and heroin, and this is heroin and cocaine addicted rats. So I'm very careful with those kind of studies because they haven't been done on humans. They're not gold standard, but it does give you an indication. And again, anybody who has gone back to the freezer for another scoop of ice cream or another Oreo knows how addictive sugar can be. And anybody in this room who's sitting there going, I really don't want to quit sugar, that is the addictive nature of sugar talking to you right now. Now, why would this be the case? Why would we be evolved? We're pretty sophisticated beings. We've been around a while now. Why would we evolve to not have an off switch and to be addicted to sugar? Well, it makes absolutely perfect sense. 10,000 years ago, we know when we were running around the savannas being chased by wildebeest, we actually, there was very, very little fructose on the planet. There was a few berries, quite bitter berries, a little bit of honey. All of it was really hard to get to. You had to climb a tree and combat bees and, climb through bushes, and there was really very little on the planet. But when we did find it, we found that when we ate it, it was an instant source of fat. So fructose is the only molecule, not only is it addictive, not only does it not possess an appetite off switch, it's the only molecule that goes straight to our liver and is processed in our liver. So other energy sources are processed through our cells, and it's a slower process. Fructose is processed in our liver, and it's basically transferred into fatty acids or liver fat within an instant. So as you drink your can of Coke, by the time you put it down, it's turned into fat. And of course, fatty acids around the liver is the worst kind of fat. Visceral fat, you've probably heard doctors and so on talk about visceral fat. It's the fat that gets in and around your organs. Very hard to lose. It's very much linked to heart disease and a whole range of other metabolic diseases. So wonderful when you're being chased by a wildebeest, or you've got to go and hunt your honey or your berries for a whole day. Okay, we need this energy. We were designed not to expend more energy than it takes to go and get our food, if you know what I mean. So we actually had these pockets of high saturated quantities of fat via fructose that actually gave us that instant energy. So of course we evolved to be highly addicted to it, to seek it out, to be obsessed by it, and then to gorge on it, to have to be able to find a berry bush and eat it and eat it and eat it and eat it, and really, really get some good quality quantities of fat into us. And that made sense back then. Of course, it makes absolutely no sense now. Now our bodies, our genealogy is exactly the same as it was 10,000 years ago, but our diets are dramatically different. So I probably don't have to spell out how bad that equation all works out to be. We only have to sort of look around the world we're in to see just how sick sugar is in fact making us. The final thing that, of course, we're discovering really only in the last 30 to 60 years is that fructose is also causing what are called metabolic diseases. They're very much the modern diseases that we all hear about. So type 2 diabetes, everything, Alzheimer's. I think they're saying that there's about 22 different types of metabolic diseases, depends on who you talk to. We're talking, as I say, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, a bunch of cancers, autoimmune diseases, anything to do with inflammation. Sugar causes inflammation. And essentially, there's now very, very convincing science linking sugar to pancreatic cancer, and I think we're going to see it linked to even more cancers going forward. The peer-reviewed studies are starting to roll in week after week, and you're probably seeing them in the press on a regular basis. So the next question I get asked is, well, why aren't we told all of this? If this is such terrible news, why hasn't some edict been issued? From above? Well, I guess there's been attempts, and of course, I was talking to somebody at lunch today. Those attempts are sort of shouted down by the sugar lobby as sort of efforts from the nanny state. We've heard that over and over again. And I was sharing at lunch that somebody said to me recently at a conference I was speaking at with Dr. Lustig and a bunch of other actually American scientists. And this woman who was speaking, she said, well, look, if you're at the nanny state, okay, well, my nanny, she knew what she was talking about. And when it comes to diets and dietary thinking, I would actually listen to my nanny before I listen to anyone else. And I think we've actually got to a point where we actually do need government intervention on this on this matter. Problem is, of course, there's a web of, and I won't say conspiracy or anything like that. I actually think there's very good reason why we've been led to believe that sugar is fine and fairly innocuous. Okay, it's empty calories, but a bit of sweet stuff's not going to hurt anyone. Everything in moderation. I hear that all of the time. It goes back to the 1960s. Basically, there was heart disease was on the up and up, and I think Eisenhower, I think I've got the right era, had a heart attack. And so, the search was on for what was the cause of heart disease, as well as obesity levels that were starting to increase. And there was one scientist here in the US called Ancel Keys, and there was another scientist in the UK, both working on this very matter. Over in the UK, the science had found that sugar was the problem. Over here, saturated fat was found to be the problem. Now, the study that was done back in the 1960s, Ancel Keys was the guy that invented the army ration packs. He was the beloved scientist within the government because he was a bit of a hero for inventing these ration packs. And he was quite a media tart for back then. He knew how to get a headline, And he managed to do this study on 22 countries around the world. Problem was that linked obesity and heart disease, I should say, and saturated fat consumption. Now, fantastic, except for the fact that he decided to only release the results of 7 of the 22 countries. And of course, he cherry-picked the 7 countries that showed a connection between saturated fat and heart disease. And so back then, before we had Bing or Google, people just accepted it. The FDA took on board that advice and developed the food pyramid. We all grew up, I think everybody in the room is old enough to have grown up with the food pyramid. That food pyramid then travelled around the world. I grew up with the food pyramid in Australia. It's gone throughout the world. And as you know, at the bottom, it's got carbs. And if you have a look at the picture that they draw, there's donuts and muffins and so on. Nobody distinguishes what kind of carbs, so we're talking sugar. Then you've got protein, and then of course you've got that tiny little segment at the top, which is fat. And we were very much advised not to eat saturated fat. Many of us grew up being told margarine was the way to go. The various health organisations took all of this on. Then we got subsidised sugar, and then subsidised corn syrup. And so then we had excess amounts, and basically it became a very cheap product. There became vested interests in ensuring that the food that we eat contains sugar and of course corn syrup, and around it went. And to the point where now if you have a look at the Dietitians, I think Association of America, I think that's the correct title. In Australia it's the DAA, I think it's the DAA here as well. If you have a look at the various heart foundations and so on, have a look at their sponsorship pages. You will be absolutely horrified, or perhaps not, to find that their major sponsors, their main sponsors, are Coca-Cola, Nestle, Kellogg's, and so on, basically big sugar. So we've got these organisations, we've got nutritionists, we've got a whole range of people invested in this idea that saturated fat is bad. Now, there is a link between saturated fat and sugar, and the link is this. When you take saturated fat out of a product, you've got to put something else back in to make it taste good and also to replace that fullness of mouth texture, okay? So what has everyone been putting back in for the last 40, 50, 60 years? Sugar. So the low-fat industry is in complete cahoots with the sugar industry. So if you go and compare low-fat and a full-fat version of something, you'll find that the main difference is that the low-fat version is absolutely drenched in sugar. So much so that you end up getting this ridiculous scenario where the full-fat version is way less fattening once it's in our body. On a plate, yes, you add up the calories, and the full-fat version will probably come out as more fattening. But when we eat it, and I kind of think we all know that that's the important bit, right? We don't sit there with it on a plate, we eat stuff. Once it's in our bodies, and it's a completely different equation, and basically the fat gets metabolised, we burn it off slowly, it triggers the satiation, the appetite hormones, we break things down. When it's a full fat version, it's got all the enzymes that help you break down that particular food. When you take fat out, often all of the enzymes come out, so you actually are not metabolising the food properly. And yes, you get full, so you don't eat as much. And I think last week, was it last week, your speaker was speaking about the whole calories in, calories out. Jonathan Baylor, is that right? I think some of you might have come to his presentation, and from what I know of his book, he very much dispels that whole calorie myth. When we eat food, it has a very different, we're not that simple. If it was calories in, calories out, fat makes you fat, I mean, life would be a lot simpler, but unfortunately that's not the way we work. So that's why we're not being told. So we've got to work it out for ourselves, and we've got to make the change ourselves. And, my book's called I Quit Sugar. It's not called you must quit sugar or everyone go and quit sugar. It's I quit sugar, I gave it a go and I tried it all out and this is how it worked and this is what might work for you. I've got a question at the back. Did you want to ask it now or at the end?
Quick, it's relevant now, I guess. I'm
Sure.
confused a little about like your stance on, you talk about added sugars and manufactured foods. Like if I'm eating an apple, if I'm eating a banana or an orange, right? So does that come with fructose? So do you have the same problems or it's okay because it has also a whole bunch of fibers?
Okay, so the question is what about whole fruit? I think that's, you know, is that, does that contain sugar? Is that included in these sugar sort of recommendations? Well, very good question because I'm about to get to all of that right now. So if you want to wait 5 minutes, I'll tick all of that off, but very good question. So I get asked often, what are some things that you can do to cut back on sugar? So there's a couple of things you can do, and this is where I think I get to your point. The first thing you can do is not drink your sugar in any form whatsoever. So if you don't want to quit sugar straight away, it's all just too much, if you've got a gnarly, white-knuckled resistance to the whole idea, there are a few really basic things that you may be doing that, you know, you can probably start to eliminate and it'll probably make a very big difference. So don't drink your sugar. So fruit juice. A glass of Coca-Cola, it's just a standard glass, sort of the same amount contained in a can, is around about 9 to 10 teaspoons of sugar. A glass of apple juice, whether it comes from a carton or whether it's been freshly squeezed by Buddhist monks using organic apples on the side of a mountaintop in Burma, it doesn't matter, right? It's the same stuff when we're talking sugar. Glass by glass, they contain exactly the same amount of sugar, about 9 to 10 teaspoons. So if you're somebody who's skipping breakfast and going to one of those juice bars, you know, and getting a kale, apple, pear, peach and spirulina, whatever it is, I'm betting your sugar consumption is way over your daily recommended sugar consumption. And that is a really scary thing. So if you can cut out juice, never drink juice. Drink water, milk, tea, coffee. All the rest go. And while I mention milk, milk is sweet. It does contain sugar. It contains lactose. Okay, lactose is not the same as fructose. A lot of people have evolved, especially you know, in Western cultures, to actually metabolize lactose. So it's you know, if you've got a lactose intolerance is a different story. But from the fructose point of view, it contains absolutely no fructose. Milk is fantastic stuff if you can tolerate it. So fruit juice. The next one is low-fat products. I mentioned it a moment ago. When they take fat out, a lot of manufacturers put fat back in. So go and compare your mayonnaise, low fat, full fat. Go and have a look at the sugar content and you'll see what I mean. Probably the worst culprit, and again, it's a breakfast food, is yogurt. So if you're looking at a small carton of yogurt, you know, or a standard serve, for a low-fat, plain, unsweetened yogurt, okay, no added sugar, you're talking about 6 teaspoons of sugar. Now, how can they whack on a label that says natural and, you know, no added sugar? Well, they disguise it and they put it in the form of things like inulin, which is essentially a sugar once it's broken down in the body, but it can be classified as a fibre or a prebiotic. You know, we know this wording from the side of the punnet, don't we? So low-fat yogurt in particular is absolutely drenched with sugar. Now, if you want to go into the detail of how to read a label, I've got that in my book. Bear in mind, it's probably going to become, hopefully, outdated very soon because the FDA is about to change their labelling laws, which is fantastic news because American nutritional labels you need a degree in science or maybe to work at Microsoft to be able to read them and calculate how much sugar you're actually eating. But as just a top-line thing, eat the full-fat version, people. You know, it's the best way to go. It contains the enzymes that break down the food. It will satiate you so you eat less of it. It will contain the nutrients that you need so you're not actually eating empty calories. And it means it doesn't contain the added sugar. The final thing that you can do is avoid sauces. So people say to me, well, you know, I eat out quite a bit. I used to be a restaurant reviewer. I still am very heavily involved in the food industry and I eat out quite a bit. So, you know, how do I do that? Well, the best thing to do is to avoid sauces. So when you go to, I don't know, your food court over here at Microsoft or even, if you're choosing between restaurants. I went over to the food court and had lunch over there today. I chose fish, pork, vegetables with no gooby sauces. Gooby sauces, the goob, that's sugar, okay? Barbecue sauce, tomato sauce, 50% sugar. Contains more sugar than chocolate ice cream topping. When you go to a Thai restaurant, you can have in one serve up to half a cup of sugar. And that's why it tastes so good. If you're going out for dinner, choose Indian over Thai and just request that there's no sugar, but it's generally sweetened with coconut products. And coconut's fantastic stuff. Very low in fructose and beautiful sweetener and a beautiful source of fat. This is a piece of trivia for you. I'm often asked, what's my big sort of go-to thing to eat when I've got a sugar craving? This is when everyone's ears prick up. And I did, I forget the name of it, not Daybreak, what's that? Good Day, thank you, this morning. And I left my coconut oil with Margaret because she was like, what's the trick? What do I do? What can I do when I just get that hankering? And I think a lot of women in the room, men as well, know that feeling after lunch when you're just like, I'm not feeling full, I'm needing something sweet, and you hold out till about 3 o'clock and then you go and have your muffin or your candy bar. My trick is to eat a tablespoon or 2 of pure coconut oil, pure saturated fat. It's sweet. I mix it with cacao sometimes. It's got a beautiful sweet flavour. You have it, and a few people in the room have tried it because I was speaking earlier. You eat it and all of a sudden you just go, oh, and then you can get on with the rest of your day and you can get through to dinner without needing to eat another thing. Now, it's a medium chain fatty acid. The only other, and it contains an acid called lauric acid. The only other substance on the planet that contains lauric acid is breast milk, mother's breast milk. It is incredible for your metabolism. If you are needing to lose a little bit of weight, it is the secret weapon. It works incredible. I can see your face. Your face is just not looking impressed with the idea of eating a spoonful of coconut oil. But seriously, it is. What was that?
2 tablespoons?
1 to 2. Yeah, 1 to 2. And if you like, you can mix it with some cacao powder and to make it into a chocolatey snack. I make my chocolate recipes are basically coconut oil, cacao, and a little bit of brown rice syrup as a sweetener. Or I personally don't use the sweetener anymore. I just don't need it. My taste buds have changed quite a lot. But cook with it. I cook my pumpkin, my sweet potato. I cook chicken. It's got a really high smoke point. It's one of the safest oils to cook with. Indian cooking, they know what they're on about. It's fantastic and fantastic for inflammation as well. So if you've got any kind of chronic illness, it is wonderful stuff. Anyway, I'm not paid by the coconut oil industry, by the way. So sauces, yes, Indian food can often be a lot better than Thai food. Greek food's fantastic. It's grilled meats, it's salads, it's vegetables, anything where you can see what the thing. If you can point to the ingredients and you know what they are, then it's generally okay. Gooby sauces, avoid them. So getting back to the fruit question, I've said fruit juice is bad. I'll also add to that dried fruit. Dried fruit works out to be around about 60 to 70% sugar. That's why breakfast cereals, the healthy breakfast cereals, contain just in 1 cup about 5 to 6 teaspoons of sugar, and that's predominantly from the dried fruit. And people say, oh, it's natural. Well, my response to that is, well, so is arsenic and petroleum. Does it mean we're meant to eat it? Now, granted, whole fruit contains wonderful fibre, and it contains lots of minerals and vitamins. And yes, it does contain a lot of fructose. So an apple will contain around about 3 teaspoons of sugar, a banana 3 to 4 teaspoons, depending obviously on the size of the piece of fruit. You can choose low fructose fruit, and that's what I tend to eat. So berries are fantastic. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and so on. Kiwi fruit is fantastic. It's low in fructose as well. Grapefruit is okay. Your stone fruits are medium. Your worst culprits, and you're probably not going to be surprised, pineapple, bananas and grapes and watermelon, okay? Really high in sugar. And, I don't know about you, but most people don't eat just, a small handful of grapes. People can eat this many grapes. And you're eating vast quantities of sugar. So Whole fruit is fantastic stuff, and if you are getting your sugar intake from whole fruit, then you know what, that's the best thing you can do for your health. And I have absolutely no problem with it. The fibre slows down the passage of the sugar onto your liver. You know, the water also slows it down and ensures that everything's metabolised well. But if you're eating a fruit salad with 3 or 4 pieces of fruit in it, you are consuming double the amount of sugar that you're meant to in one day. So just bear that in mind. I personally err towards vegetables. I find vegetables contain more minerals. It's more bang for your buck, you know, and that's just how I go about things. Some of the other questions I get asked, and I'll cross over to your own questions in a moment, but I'm guessing that some of you might be wondering about alcohol. Well, I've got good news. Good news and bad news. The good news is that in wine, for instance, I'm a really keen red wine drinker. It's the sugar that ferments to become alcohol. So very little fructose is left in red wine. White wine, not so much. Champagne or sparkling, I'd avoid because it's still got quite high quantities. Your white spirits, your dry spirits, are no fructose. So they're a better option. Beer is maltose. Again, it's not fructose. So I'm absolutely not advocating going out and getting sloshed instead of having dessert. And Dr. Lustig has a really good saying, a glass of wine, treat it as dessert. So a glass of wine, 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night, is absolutely fantastic for your metabolism and so on. And in fact, Lustig in his latest book outlines science, which is not absolutely proven, but that does point to the fact that the health benefits of red wine. It actually sends your body into a slight shock. It gets your body activated and your blood sugar levels kind of fired up, and it means that when you eat your meal, you actually metabolise it in a far safer way. So 1, maybe 2 if you're a bigger person, glasses of wine is great. When you have your spirits, mix it with soda or soda water or seltzer or whatever it is that you want to call it, not tonic water. Tonic water is just as sugary, almost as sugary as Coca-Cola. So yes, that's the answer on alcohol. Again, remember, alcohol taxes your liver. So if your liver's going through a rough time, really go easy on the alcohol. And then sweeteners. People often want to know what sweeteners I use, and in my book I outline the details in a lot of detail. I looked into it for a number of years and, looked at the science, looked at what was happening overseas. There's a number of artificial sweeteners that are allowed in Australia and in the US, which are banned in Japan and the EU. Splenda, I think, is one of them. I avoid all of those. Anything ending in OL, sorbitol, maltitol, and so on, avoid, okay? It's a sugar alcohol, and what that means is that it's very hard to digest. I don't know if you've noticed when you have chewing gum, it can make you a little bit gassy. That's basically because your stomach is just going, I don't know what to do with this, it's like, it doesn't have the choppers to break down the molecules, so it just passes it to the large intestine, and the large intestine basically has to use all kinds of bacteria to try to break it down, and it invariably produces a fair bit of wind. Not good on your stomach apart from anything else. So avoid anything ending in OL. And a lot of sugar-free products have maltitol. Be really aware of that. There are 2 exceptions. Xylitol. Anyone who goes to health food shops, you might have noticed xylitol being sold. It's deemed relatively safe. It's fairly processed, not the best option. Now, the 2 sweeteners, and the other exception is erythritol, which is generally mixed with stevia. And I know many of you would have heard of stevia because it's starting to get a lot of traction. Stevia is a plant. It's related to the mint plant, and it's got a bit of a bitter taste. It's mixed with erythritol to kind of turn it into a granule, like sugar. So it can be used 1 for 1, like normal table sugar. And it also gets rid of that sort of bitter taste to a certain extent. So I think here the most popular one is Truvia. And I think Equal also make a stevia. And in fact, I found one this morning. So it's in my other jacket pocket. It's a stevia mixed with dextrose. And dextrose is glucose. And I mentioned another exception to the OS rule. Dextrose, glucose, we can metabolise them. So I think this particular one is mixed with dextrose, which is I hadn't seen before. So stevia, fantastic. It's natural, albeit processed, but it's quite a good substitute. And the other one that I really like to use, and it's relatively unheard of here, is brown rice syrup. It's essentially a slow-releasing carbohydrate. It's 20% moisture, 80% a sort of concoction of glucose and maltose, and it breaks down quite slowly in the body. So it's not that huge dump into the system. I use it like honey. I bake with it. I drizzle a little bit of it every now and then on some things. And it's available in most health food shops. It's going to become more readily available, I feel. And it's really interesting. Gwyneth Paltrow put out her cookbook a little while back, and it used maple syrup and agave and blah, blah, blah. And agave, as I mentioned, and I think I mentioned, is 70 to 90% fructose. It is one of the worst things that you can do. Do not touch agave. Apart from the fact also that it's really processed, there's all kinds of political and ethical issues with it as well. But she's now, in her second book, she has a very famous a chocolate brownie recipe, and in her first book it's made with maple syrup and agave. And in her second book, and I flatter myself to think that I might have had something to do with this. She actually does contribute a recipe to my book, but she uses brown rice syrup. So there's a few more chefs starting to use this. Yes?
What about coconut palm sugar?
Oh, good question. What about coconut palm sugar? Sometimes there's also coconut nectar as well, and coconut blossom nectar. It is essentially palm sugar, which is about 35 to 45% fructose, and it's not as sweet, so a lot more is used, and that's what's often used in Thai food, is the palm sugars, and large amounts of it. So a lot of health food shops and vegan places and raw food places use it, and they love to say it's natural. So is arsenic and petroleum, yeah, it's not as high, but people do tend to add more of it, so it works out much the same. So yeah, brown rice syrup, I think it's great stuff. It's quite affordable. It's about the same price as honey. I've gradually reduced the amounts that I need, which is a really good idea, because any sweetener now, they've released some studies that have shown that even just the sweet taste can continue a sugar addiction. So the more that we can get off these artificial sweeteners and these sugar substitutes, the better. I do confess to having a number of dessert recipes in my book, but I do flag that they're to be treated as treats. Even though they're sugar-free, they need to be eaten as treats. So that's sort of my overview. I try not to get too preachy, but I sometimes can't help it because I'm behind a pulpit and I have a microphone and a willing audience. So. Any questions? I can see a hand up at the back.
Two questions. Monk fruit.
Monk fruit?
Yeah, as a sweetener, and is there a difference between dried fruit and regular fruit in any major respect?
Okay, so the first question is monk fruit. It's a relatively new sweetener, and good on you for hearing about it. It's some African fruit that's really ugly looking, and it's been used as a sweetener. And I think it's been used in a very similar way to stevia. It needs to be mixed with erythritol to be sort of granulated and to be palatable. They're still experimenting with it. I'm not seeing it being used by manufacturers yet. Coca-Cola and Pepsi and so on are all experimenting with stevia at the moment, and I'm hearing all kinds of rumours about Pepsi trying to buy out all stevia crops around the world, that kind of thing. I'm not hearing it about the ugly and humble monk fruit yet. But yeah, keep an eye out for it. In Australia, we can get it as a granulated sort of substitute, but I haven't found great results with it yet. But I'd say the science will start to improve. The second thing was the dried fruit thing. Dried fruit is basically, you take all the moisture out, you're left with a very concentrated nodule of sugar. So around about 70% sugar. So it's, if you can treat each, sort of a dried apricot as, if you have two halves, two pieces of dried apricot, and that's as much as you eat, then that's fantastic. I don't know too many people that only eat two halves of a dried apricot. You generally eat a handful. You're consuming about 5 pieces of fruit. So avoid dried fruit. Absolutely. Yes.
What about things like rice and other grains, pasta, bread?
Carbs. Starchy carbs. Yeah, I get asked this all the time. Where does that all fit in? Okay, so I'm the quit sugar girl. I focus on that message. Ask me personally, about carbs, and I should sort of add to that thing. I say work on one thing at a time. So if you're trying to get some sugar out of your diet, work on processed sugar and obvious sugars. And then if you do it for a couple of months and you start to see some results, you may find benefits from cutting back on your starchy carbs. Now, the science does show that these starchy carbs break down pretty fast into essentially sugar and has very similar metabolic effects. And we're seeing a lot of people, the paleo diet and all of that kind of thing. There's a lot of credence, I think. There's also a lot of nutters attached to some of these movements. And I distance myself a little bit from it. Ask me personally, yes, I eat minimal carbs because I find them hard to digest. The toxins as well, the argument I make is that a lot of these grains contain toxins. Cows have hoofs, various animals have horns to defend themselves, grains have husks, which are which contain toxins. So that's why a lot of people get bloated when they eat legumes and various grains. It's, if you're somebody who's preparing your grains really well, that can make a difference. Generally, most people don't. So yeah, I tend to avoid them. They're low nutritional value. They contain toxins and so place a load on your digestion. And we just all have weak digestive systems now. And there are much better things to eat. When I sort of see them as a bit of a waste of my saliva glands.
Going to eat them, what would be like the best?
Okay, so I'll give you a nice little snapshot thing. People ask me what's the best bread to eat. Sourdough. Even some commercial sourdoughs that you get from your Safeway or whatever will still be better than a lot of your whole grains. Whole grain bread, forget it. It's it's a very long story. If you want to read about it, read Michael Pollan's Cooked. It's a fantastic book, and it does go into quite some detail as to the whole grain. I'd prefer to eat white bread to whole grain, to be honest, in terms of the toxic load on my stomach and digestibility. It provides very little nutritional benefit that, really. But sourdough, the yeast, it's an alive culture. It actually helps break down the gluten and it also breaks down any sugar. So that's the best way to go. Yes?
What can you share on milk versus like whole milk versus the non-fat milk?
Whole milk, so milk, full fat versus semi or whatever, skim milk. Always eat the whole food. Our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers, they knew what they were talking about. Now, essentially, when pig farmers, when they want to fatten their pigs, they feed them skim milk because it's basically got a much higher sugar load. Not because it's added, but because when you take out the other bits and pieces, what you're left with is sugary water. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's far more fattening. I know it doesn't seem to make sense, but have a look around at everybody eating low-fat products and have a look around at how many of them are not losing weight. The other thing is when you take out fat, you take out a lot of the wonderful enzymes. So the lactase is the enzyme that breaks down the lactose. A lot of people I know who thought that they were milk intolerant started drinking full-fat milk as an experiment and found they had no problems because they're actually drinking the enzyme that helps break down the lactose. Don't mess with your food. Never eat an egg white omelette. Oh my goodness, it's probably one of the worst things you can do. Egg white is really hard to digest. You need the enzymes that are contained in the egg yolk to break it down. You also need the fat that's contained in the egg yolk to actually absorb the proteins. I mean, Mother Nature knew what she was doing. We just tamper and get fat and sick. Yes?
I want to go back to what you said at the beginning and understand what is the link between autoimmune and sugar, quitting sugar.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that you went off your meds, and as I understand it, it's like you have to supplement your thyroxine in the case of thyroid.
Okay.
So
you obviously know
your
diseases. Yeah.
Are you saying that you no longer need to supplement thyroxine?
No. I was careful to say that I, through diet, over a very long period of time, I have been able to reduce the amount of medication I take, and I've been able to modulate my health. So the question was the link between autoimmune disease and sugar consumption, and also whether quitting sugar has seen me come off my meds. I still take thyroxine, and I may have to take it for the rest of my life, and that's fine. I mean, modern medicine is required when you have a complete deficiency. So I take a small amount. So I've reduced it from 250 micrograms down to 25 a day, and that works for me now. You know, and I find that because my blood sugar levels are stable, all of my hormones have kicked in, you know, I've basically restored a lot of the damage. And doctors sort of go, "Wow, how did you do that?" So, and I'm not unusual. There's a number of people, you know, I know in my orbit who've done the same thing through food. You manage your illness rather than it managing you. So the connection between autoimmune and sugar, at its most basic level, sugar inflames. Okay. All autoimmune diseases are an inflammatory disease. And the other thing, it attacks your gut. Sugar basically destroys your gut. You've probably heard of leaky gut. And essentially, most people with an autoimmune disease have a leaky gut. And what happens is toxins and foods and gluten, in the case of thyroid in particular, gluten passes through into your bloodstream, your antibodies come out as they need to and attack. Now, you've probably scratched yourself and got a scab. It gets inflamed, gets red, and it pushes to the surface. That's what our immune system does. Or a splinter, it'll, you know, push it to the surface and do its work and heal. It's fantastic. What happens when you've got an autoimmune disease? It gets confused and it goes, "Hey, let's just kind of go out and attack some organs while we're here." And in my case, the gluten molecule is very similar looking to the thyroid receptors on our cells. Pretty much every cell in our body has a thyroid receptor. And so when we eat gluten, it brings out the antibodies, and the antibodies go, "Hey, let's go and attack." And so it goes around and has a bit of a party on my thyroid. And that's what happens with all inflammatory diseases. So that's a couple of the connections. Then you introduce the insulin, you introduce the hormonal imbalances, and it's just this cluster. I was going to say the rude version of that word, but the cluster of stuff. Yeah. How much time have I got left? I haven't been keeping an eye on time. Oh, there is the time. I've got, how much more? Oh, I've got another 10 minutes of questions. I think I saw a hand up over there. Yes. Yep, that's you.
If you want to quit sugar, do you recommend like going turkey or cold turkey or?
Yeah, how to quit sugar, cold turkey or otherwise. Well, a lot of people say moderation. And I say you can't, unfortunately, sugar is the only molecule on the planet where you just can't do moderation. We're not designed. It is literally the only thing on the planet where we cannot do moderation with it. So yes, I do suggest cold turkey. My 8-week program, and it's, I don't like doing the salesy thing, but I did research it with addiction theorists and so on, and worked out sort of the best kind of way to do it. So it's an easing off for 1 week, and then it's cold turkey. It's replacing sugar with fats. Essentially, you're switching your body from a kind of, if you can imagine your metabolism is like a fire, and when you eat sugar and cheap carbohydrates, you're throwing like Kero and paper onto the fire, and it'll keep burning, but you're going to have to attend to that fire all day. When you throw on proteins and fats, it's like putting a log on the fire. You put it on, you eat it, 5-6 hours it slowly burns, and 5 or 6 hours you've got to replace things and you're ready for your next meal. And that takes about 6 weeks to adjust, you know, that appetite mechanism. So I recommend an 8-week process, and you know, for 6 of those weeks it's absolutely no sugar, no sweetener either, no brown rice syrup or stevia, and in the final week you introduce fruit and things like that back in. So it's no fruit for that 6 weeks, which people go, oh. But, you know, I live to tell the tale. I lived for 6 weeks without fruit. Yes. And I've got another question here. I saw you. Yeah.
So you said that like the green smoothies are full of sugar?
Okay, so green smoothies versus green juices. So green juices is the difference being you squeeze and don't include the fibre. A green smoothie, if it's actually made in the proper way, blended, where you don't actually chuck any of the stuff out, is a much better option because you're getting the whole fruit, you're getting the fibre, you're getting everything in there. I actually have a real thing with food wastage. I campaign against it in Australia, and so I have a problem with juicing for that reason as well. But green smoothies, if you're going to go for a green smoothie, go for one that has very little fruit in it. I personally don't need the fruit in it. I'll throw 1 or 2 frozen strawberries in and blend it up with, you know, some cucumber, celery and so on. But yeah, I think green smoothies are fine. It's green juices that are the problem because they don't have any of the fibre. Yes?
Another thing that we've been taught to do is graze every 2 to 3 hours, full meals every 2 to 3 hours. I noticed you just said 5 to 6 hours, so I don't know if you were being literal. Can you?
Yes, I am being absolutely literal. Okay. So the whole idea of grazing and eating 5 to 6 meals a day was invented literally in the 1990s. So it was kind of invented by nutritionists because we were all having blood sugar issues. We were so addicted to sugar that we need to keep the roller coaster going. So you speak, you know, to generations previously, they ate 3 meals a day. And if you go to Europe, they don't snack. They have breakfast, lunch and dinner. And in fact, in many countries, it's lunch and dinner, you know. They'll sort of have something very small for breakfast and it's lunch and dinner. But they sit down and they eat a proper meal. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I think one of the big problems in the West, we don't eat enough. We don't eat enough at lunch in particular. So people have these like little kind of a sushi roll and then like, you know, a little this and a little that or a little salad, you know, hold the dressing. And then they go and eat a whopping great piece of banana, you know, muffin in the afternoon. And then they go and eat something else before dinner. They pre-eat and then they go and have their dinner and then they have something after dinner. Throw a log on the fire and get on with the rest of your life and stop thinking about food is what I say. So I eat 3 meals a day, but I eat 1 to 2 tablespoons of butter or oil on everything. Vitamins A, E, K and D, which are your essential vitamins in vegetables, especially leafy greens, are not absorbable without fat. They're fat-soluble vitamins. And there we are eating these, you know, eating them without fat. You know, the French, our grandparents, they all put butter on their vegetables for that reason. So, yeah, I'm very much against, and in fact on my 8-week program online, I have an online program if you want menu plans and shopping lists and the whole thing, recipes for the whole 8 weeks, at iQuitSugar.com. It's no snacking from week 7 onwards. Yeah, so I eat my snacks with my lunch. That's what I say. So at the end of lunch, I have my like coconut chocolate thing. Yeah, so that's the way I do it. And I eat like that much. I eat that much food for lunch, you know, and then I'm done. So, yeah. Anyway, there's a lot, you'll read a lot more about all of this because the science is rolling in and showing that, you know, it's not good for us to not give our stomachs a rest. I've got room for one more. I'll do these 2, sorry. Yeah.
On a typical day, what do you eat for 3 meals?
What do I eat typically? Okay, so for breakfast, I will eat, some of these recipes are in the book. I'll eat some spinach and frozen peas. It sounds ridiculous. I cook all my vegetables and I encourage this in the book, is to cook up your vegetables when you first buy them. So I'll go and buy my broccoli and my kale. I steam them all up and put them into Ziploc containers. I'm single, I live on my own, so it's a way, my freezer's full of these individual serves. So I grab one of those, put some frozen peas in it, I take it to work, I throw them in a bowl, 2 eggs and maybe some cheese, stir it up, put it in the microwave. I don't have a problem with microwaves if it gets real food into me, and that's my breakfast. Or I'll have a green smoothie and I'll eat it with a handful of nuts. I will make a big smoothie with basically cacao, like a chocolate smoothie, with cacao and milk and yogurt and chia seeds and so on. For lunch, I do a lot of slow cooking. So I make these big batches of slow cooked meat with vegetables and freeze them in batches. So at the office, I defrost it and I just take in a zucchini and a handful of beans and steam that up with it. So it's vegetables and meat. I have these mishmash meals and I've got some recipes in there where I just kind of one-pan wonders, just cook up a whole heap of vegetables. I use sausage, you know, it's a really easy, a good quality sausage. I just cut that up and cook it up. Dinner, it's sort of much the same thing, or I'm out for dinner. So at a restaurant, I eat Greek food, I eat a lot of the cheese, I calamari, you know, I'll eat sort of fish and vegetables. So yeah, that's and my coconut oil. Yeah. Oh, at the back.
I have a tough one. Yes, you sold me. That sounds great. And all. I've got 4 kids. Is there any advice you have?
There you go. I didn't mean to groan. Sorry. Yeah, it is harder. I'm going to sound salesy. In Australia, we're very awkward about doing hard sell. We almost pretend we've got nothing to sell. In fact, you know, we almost tell people not to. Oh, look, don't buy my book, you know. But maybe I should feel confident here saying I've got a book called an I Quit Sugar Kids Cookbook, which is available online. It's an e-book. And so it's got kids' recipes and it's got advice for how to deal with kids. A couple of really quick pointers. I'm sure many of you here are parents. Don't stigmatise sugar. So my big thing is don't talk about not eating sugar. Just have really great food in your house that just happens to not contain sugar. Don't get hung up about kids' parties. If they go to a party and eat a whole heap of sugar, just kind of, as soon as you stigmatise it, you know when you see a wet paint, don't touch sign, all you want to do is touch it. You know, tell kids not to eat sugar, they're just going to become obsessed. So I think kids, just like adults, if they start to eat less and less sugar, they'll go to the party, have a couple of sips of soda and feel sick. And that generally is what happens. I think keep it as natural as possible. Cut out the fruit juice, the dried fruit in your granola bars and all of that kind of thing. Just make swaps without making a big deal of it, and get your kids cooking and get your kids shopping. So if you want to start to educate your kids at that age, take them shopping with you and tell them to go and find the mayonnaise with the least amount of sugar or the yogurt with the least amount of sugar, and then they're responsible. So there'd just be a couple of tips. And good luck. All right, well, I think that's all I've got time for. I'm going to sign some books, so if you've got any specific questions, come and ask me. Thanks.